Rodney M. Cluff, raised in a Mormon colony in Mexico, became fascinated with the hollow earth theory at 16. Inspired by scripture, science, and personal accounts, he spent over 45 years researching the idea that Earth, along with other planets and celestial bodies, is hollow and inhabited. His book World Top Secret, Our Earth is Hollow, presents evidence from satellite imagery, polar explorer reports, seismic data, and scripture suggesting the lost tribes of Israel and others live inside the Earth. Though a planned Arctic expedition was canceled, Cluff continues to promote his theory and encourages others to explore inner Earth.
Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Welcome to High Strangeness. I'm Tony, and this is a place where we talk about all things strange and unexpected in our reality. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the strangest and most unrecognized things that are out there actually are right under our nose? Today, we're going to be talking about something that might be right under our feet, actually. We're going to talk about a theory or a belief that maybe 4 or 5% of the Earth population believe in. And as we go through this topic, see what you think. Because this is a very interesting topic that a lot of times people don't give it the credit or attention, and I think that's a mistake. Now today I'm excited because on the show I have someone who's been on Coast to Coast AM. He's also a longtime researcher and an author focusing on the hollow earth theory. And his name is Rodney Cluff. Rodney, welcome to the show. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing fine. I'm happy to be on your show with you today.
I'm excited to get into this and to learn from you. I think it's going to be wonderful for me and the audience. Where are you joining us from today, Rodney?
Well, last year we sold our condo in Sun City, Arizona, and so we planned to move to our farm in northeast Arizona, but we don't have it ready for the winter. We have a wood stove, but it gets pretty cold during the winter here, so we went to Wichita, Kansas with our son. He works for Wichita State University. He by the way, he has a NASA grant from NASA working on a part for the astronaut suits.
Oh wow, nice. That's really pretty cool. Anytime you can be part of something like that, that's really neat and something to feel good about. So that's cool. Thank him for us for that. I'm going to ask you, you said you have a farm in Arizona. Is this anywhere near locations of high strangeness?
Well, we're close to the petrified forest. We took our other son that lives in Phoenix with his son to visit it a couple of years ago. And it's interesting to see those big trees, how they jut out of the ground, laying down. They're pretty much all knocked down, but there's some of them jutting out of a hill, just like horizontally sticking out. So yeah, I would have been really interested in the effects of Noah's flood and how it buried the planet in a whole bunch of mud. And these petrified trees out there, petrified forests, they turned to stone after being buried by Noah's flood. And also, we're not too far from the place where they blew up the nuclear bombs in New Mexico. It's about 100 miles from here.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The very first ones.
The one thing, I have one of my sons just moved back up in this area from down in Phoenix, and whoa, it's hot down there.
Oh yes,
it's so hot.
We're glad to be up here. We're up about 6,000 feet here.
Yeah. Well, the hollow earth theory. I have always had a soft spot for this theory. I'm going to tell you about something real quick, Rodney, that happened to me 1988, 89, or 90, I can't remember. I was a student at the University of Utah, And I remember I had a physics class and they were doing some astronomy stuff there, and I remember seeing something that has stuck with me forever, but I just put it away. I really didn't talk much about it till recently. I was reminded of it. I remember seeing pictures of bodies in space, planets, that looked like they had a hole at the top. I remember it looked like a swirl going towards the center. And it really, when we went through the slide deck in the class, it was amazing to me that not many people really said anything. I think some of the students weren't paying attention. But for me, I noticed that right off the bat, and the instructor kept going to the point where I didn't get a chance to ask him about it, and then I just forgot. I've always remembered that.
It sounds like the picture taken of Venus by the European Space Agency spacecraft that flew by the South Pole of Venus. They also took one of the North Pole. But it shows like a swirl, like the air is going into the South Pole, and it's probably coming out the North Pole through the polar openings.
Yeah, and the neat thing about that, I remember the question I wanted to ask the instructor but did not get a chance to is, hey, is this the way all planets are formed? Because it just seemed pretty interesting to me. And I started thinking at that point also about possibilities of Hollow Earth. But anyway, that's as a young guy, and then I put it back in the back of my head, went through with life doing things for a long time. And as I started getting back into this space a short time ago, those types of memories were coming back. So yeah, I have a soft spot for this because of seeing something personally right then and there. And it's funny because I don't really remember seeing anything like that since. So I don't know if is it being kept away so that we're not seeing this? Because I don't remember seeing any pictures of this in recent years, where people even talk about it.
Well, NASA, I'm sure, knows that the planets are hollow, and that they're inhabited. But they go along with a story that is pushed out throughout the world, evolution. Evolution is not a science theory. It's a religion. It's a religion of scientists.
Yes.
There is no evidence, absolutely no evidence for organic evolution. God created the planets.
Yeah, I've thought the same thing, Rodney, about that being its own form of religion as well. Because a lot of times it looks like the facts are being, they're trying to mold the facts into the theory. Because as you look at some things, it seems like the things that people can see, the facts that are out there, don't really support some of the science that's out there. So it's very interesting.
Well, there's a lot of evidence, in my opinion, that evolution is false. In the introduction to my book, Our Hollow Earth, or World Top Secret, Our Earth is Hollow is the name of my book. In my introduction, I talk about the theory of evolution and how it's not possible to be true.
We'll probably get into that a little bit today for sure. One of the things I wanted to say here, for those people who are quick to dismiss this, I'd ask them to think a little bit more about it. Remember, the people who tell us this is not possible are also the people who don't tell us a lot of things on purpose. So should we believe that, right? And, with plenty of evidence out there of brushing pictures of, the polar ends of the Earth, why would they do that? It's very interesting.
Well, I think the very richest people of the world want it that way.
Yeah.
In 1776, Adam Weishaupt, a Jesuit priest of the Catholic Church, organized the Illuminati. And the book was written by Professor Robinson of England in about 1798. proofs of a conspiracy, in which he put forth the evidence that he had plenty of evidence, had a pretty good-sized book showing that this organization of the Illuminati existed, and that its goal was to take over the whole world by bringing in the richest people. They organized the international bankers. The international bankers started out with Amschel Rothschild. He had a different name, but he changed his name to Rothschild. And he had 5 sons. He would put one son in each country, and his business was to lend money to governments. And if a government didn't want to pay up on the interest and on the loans, he would start a war with a neighboring country that his other son worked with. And our Federal Reserve of the United States was founded by his nephew. So they run the world. Rothschild was the Vatican bankers. They also controlled Israel when it was founded, and still do. The international bankers, is well documented in Nunderkullet conspiracy, where Gary Allen financed and set up the Bolshevik Revolution, toppled the Tsar, and that's the beginnings of communism, which they use the United States government. They have used the United States government to push the communist revolution around the world. So what do they teach in the communist countries? Evolution. You go into any school, they teach God that doesn't exist, that came into being by accident. How can things as so sophisticated as animals and plant life living symbiotically together just happen by accident? It's almost like saying that the Trump Tower in New York could happen by accident. With an accident,
Right.
You blow it up and it just falls all together. Gravity is what does it. That's what their God is gravity. But they don't realize that who controls gravity is the real creator, Jesus Christ. Right. And he doesn't create a big bang and blow up the universe and then use gravity to make it fall together. No. He uses gravity to form the planets and the sun and the stars.
Yeah. Thanks. Rodney, let's, for the benefit of the listeners, let's get very basic up front. And can you tell us what the hollow earth theory is, and how did it originate? Can you share that with the listeners now?
Well, I've been studying the hollow earth theory since I got married with my wife. We got married in 1774 in Mesa, Arizona, in the temple. One day I was driving an armored car and I saw an advertisement of the Hollow Earth, the book by Raymond Bernard. And I sent off for it, and it was a summary of several books about the Hollow Earth. I pretty much hadn't heard or known anything about it except one time when I was working on a New Mexico farm. One summer, some of us boys at the academy in Colonia Juarez. I'm from Mexico. I was born and raised descendants of American immigrants to Mexico. And the farm manager was my uncle Ralph Brown, and his son was with some of the boys that evening. The guy I was working with was Greg Bowman. He was the valedictorian of the high school that year. I really respected him and looked up to him a lot. And he told me later that the Ralph Brown's son told the boys that he had just read the book The Hollow Earth by Raymond Bernard, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic location that the Lord could hide the lost 10 tribes. I accepted that idea, and many years later, when I saw the advertisement for Raymond Bonnard's book, I was happy to get a copy of it and read the several books that it included that describe what the hollow earth theory is all about. And my conclusion is that the earth is 50% hollow. It has a shell that's 800 miles from the outside surface to the inside surface. A little bit thinner towards the equator, because as the earth is spinning around, it causes the earth to thin out at the equator. Whereas at the poles, it's the full 800 miles in thickness. And up near the pole, and I originally had the idea that the polar openings were at the poles, which I believe that they were originally, but they have been tipped. The Earth has been tipped on its axis, perhaps more than once. There's an
Is this
astronomer.
that pole shift theory that you're talking about?
Yeah, there's an astronomer in Australia that wrote a book didn't get published, but it was a really good book, in which he put together all the astronomical objects down through history that he has been able to find, and found out that they were highly accurate in indicating that the Earth was bypassed by a planet-sized comet that tipped the Earth on its axis 26.5 degrees and has gradually returned to about 23.5 degrees. But because it was bypassed by this planet-sized comet, the polar openings no longer coincide with the axis of the Earth. My estimate is that they are at 5 degrees on the Russian side of the pole, in the Arctic, and then it's just on the opposite side. So the polar openings, there's been speculation over the years of the size of the polar opening, but I accept Admiral Byrd's flight in the Operation High Jump. In 1946, he flew through the South Polar opening halfway and estimated the polar opening diameter is at 125 miles in diameter. That it probably starts at about 900 miles and then gradually curves into the Earth, and the location where the Earth the sides are the closest is 125 miles, and then it gradually goes out to the inner surface. So those are pretty. That's a pretty big hole.
Yeah.
And I found flight patterns of satellites that they don't fly over the polar opening because there's no gravity there. There's no matter in a hole that big. I have a friend. In fact, the first one that bought my book when I published it was he's now living in England, but at that time he was living in Phoenix. And on several times that he would make flights back to his hometown in South Carolina, he would fly at the back of the plane, where pilots like to sit at the that are off duty. They sit at the back of the plane. And so he asked this one, and I have his testimony on my website. You can listen to him give his testimony that he asked this pilot if there was some highly strange thing up near the North Pole. And finally he confessed that, yeah, there is. There's a big hole up there. And and the airlines can't fly over it. My buddies and I, we know that it exists, but we can't tell the public, okay, because those who control the United States control the airlines, and they don't want me telling the public this piece of information. But
That's interesting.
he admitted that there is the polar opening up there in the Arctic, and that it is so big that the airlines cannot fly across it because it's like going out into space. There's no gravity there.
Wow.
The gravity is caused by the concentration of mass. Wherever you have a concentration of mass, gravity accelerates towards the mass. And as you're going in the polar opening, gravity is accelerating into the sides of the opening, and that's what keeps the airplane at the same altitude. They can't go across it, but they can fly in it. In fact, the Soviet flyers of 1947 were the only flyers in the Arctic that were never discovered where they went. And that's because they thought they were flying over the pole, when really they weren't. That's their last known position was north of Mount Moscow. I'd have to look up the peninsula that they were on, but they were flying across this peninsula. And the last location, that known location, was at the tip of this peninsula. And then they decided to fly from there over the pole, the Arctic, to Fairbanks, Alaska. So I drew a line from that point of last known location to Fairbanks, and it went right directly over the polar opening located at 85 north, 140, I think. I
Interesting.
decided it's 140 east.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about the Soviet flyers in a second. I do want to say to the audience out there that we're going to get into a lot of questions, and there's a lot of information in Rodney's book. Once again, I just want to let you know the name of the book is World Top Secret, Our Earth is Hollow. Available on Amazon and on his website as well. So all these topics that we're going to cover today, obviously we will not get into all of them because there's a lot in there, but these are things you'll be able to read more about in greater depth. Now, one of the things you were talking about, Rodney, a minute ago, before the Soviet flyers, was the Admiral Byrd situation. And I just want to tell everybody out there that if you look for that, if you don't know who Admiral Byrd is, it's a fascinating story, fascinating situation that he found himself in. And it's not even just that, just his involvement in things even at the Antarctica and other things that have happened over the years. Really, there's a lot of amazing and interesting stories around him. And he was a big deal for a long time. So I suggest people take a look deeper into him. There's a lot actually on the internet about that as well. So before we get back into lost Soviet flyers, in your opinion, and this is the story I heard and read about Admiral Byrd, it seemed like he just kind of went into it. So your suggestion about the gravity just pulling them in rather than over the hole, maybe could pull them in. It sounds like the story I remember from Admiral Byrd, kind of just flying in there and then seeing the terrain and the the green trees and all kinds of other things down there. So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that it's not like he went down into the hole like on purpose. He just was following. It looked like it was probably just an easy, normal path for him, but he was actually going into the hole. Is that true?
Right.
Yeah.
It was in 1926 when Edmundson was flying from Spitsbergen to Alaska across the pole. Byrd flew in with his airplane and beat him to the pole in his airplane. And his co-pilot Floyd Bennett was the one that knew about the hollow earth, and on the way to the pole, he says, Byrd, I've been studying the hollow earth theory, and that up near the pole, there is an opening into the earth, and I was wondering if we could just, when we get to the pole, that we could fly over on the other side to 85 degrees and see if we can see that opening. And that's when Floyd Bennett fired up Byrd's idea, mind with the possibility that the earth was hollow. And that when they flew on the other side of the pole at 85 degrees, they saw that opening and started heading down into that opening. And like you say, there is not like a post hole where you look down in there and you see out to the other side. Right. No, it's gradual. It's very gradual. The earth gradually curves into the opening. And because the center of gravity is principally in the shell of the planet rather than in the center of the planet like orthodox scientists claim, that's the reason why you can fly through the opening and be actually headed straight down towards the center of the planet and be held to the sides of the opening. Because the opening is so big, 125 miles in diameter. Our atmosphere only goes up 25 miles. The 95% of our atmosphere is in the first 25 or 26 miles.
Yeah.
And then you're in outer space. Well, most of these airliners up there only fly 5 miles up. But Byrd, he was just a few thousand feet above the ground. And when he was flying into the polar opening, gravity was holding him to the sides. It's just as if you were flying out here on the surface of the planet anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's an amazing story that, yeah, people should spend some time looking at that, and they'll be impressed about that.
Well, it was the next year.
How he was kind of quieted. He wasn't really. He was told not to talk about any of this at one point, which was interesting.
Well, I got the whole scoop from a couple of people, and that was Colonel Billy Woodard, that spent 11.5 years in Area 51, and he found a copy of Admiral Byrd's flight to the hollow earth through the North Pole opening there, and he actually gave me the coordinates towards which he flew from Alert Base, Alaska. And when I put those coordinates on Google Earth and put a line from Alert Base, Ellis Murray Island, it went directly to the polar opening. I said it wrongly a while ago. It's 85 north, 130 east longitude. So it wasn't until the next year, 1927, because in 26 he just barely started going into the opening and then decided to go back. And so the next year in 1927, that's the other source that I have. It's the book by John B. Lith, Genesis for the Space Race. I was given a copy of his book before he published it in 2008, and he didn't allow it to be published until he passed away. But he was a really connected intelligence officer of the United States government before and after World War II. And when he started to do this research, he didn't know that the Earth was hollow. And the more he got into it, he's when he found out that Admiral Byrd had found out that the Earth is hollow. And it was in 1927 that the United States Navy sponsored Admiral Byrd and Floyd Bennett to fly through the North Polar opening from Alert Base, Ellesmere Island, northern Canada. And that's the coordinates that Billy Woodard gave me that I put them on the Google map and put a line from the alert base to those coordinates and continued them on, and it went right through the polar opening where I had estimated it to be.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, it's there. Let's go back a little bit to the lost Soviet flyers. I don't know much about that. What is that story, briefly, for everybody? You started talking about it a few minutes ago, but were these, how many of these were there, and did they truly just disappear? Are they gone? What happened with those?
Well, on August 12, 1937, a 4-engine aircraft passenger type left Moscow, bound for Fairbanks, Alaska, with a crew of 6 seasoned flyers, and were lost and never found in the Arctic.
Hmm.
And they're the only flight that was never found.
Yeah.
And Stefansson, in his book Unsolved Mysteries of the Arctic, explains how it was so mysterious of where this flight went. But when I read the book, I realized that the last known location of the lost Soviet flyers was on the peninsula that was north of Moscow, on their way to cross the Arctic Ocean. It's called Submarine Island, and it was their last known location was the tip of Submarine Island. It's sort of like a peninsula up there, but apparently it is an island. Just before they passed out of the Kara Sea, across the Arctic Ocean. And his article, everybody thought that they had continued towards the North Pole, and then went over to Fairbanks. Well, no. Why would they do that?
Right.
They just continued from that point where they knew they were, straight across the Arctic Ocean to Fairbanks. And I drew a line from their last known location to Fairbanks, and it crosses the polar opening at 8,530 east longitude. So that's the logical location. In fact, their radio signals were received, and they got dimmer and dimmer, like as if they were going farther and farther away as they were flying into the polar opening, into the hollow earth. And they probably either crashed, or if they were able to crash land, they would have just stayed there, because it's just a paradise in the hollow earth.
Right. Yeah, and everybody, we're going to spend some time in a little bit here talking about the how the inner Earth is, what is said to be in there. But we do know through the Admiral Byrd story that those flyers may have interacted with a community, people that live in the inner Earth, and maybe they just chose not to come back. Do you know how many flyers were there? How many planes were there?
There was just one plane, and there was a crew of 6, and it was August 12th, 1937. And the United States sent up planes to. They went all over that area north of Canada, looking for them, but they were They were looking in the wrong location, because they didn't ever go over the pole. They went just straight across the Arctic Ocean from Submarine Island.
Interesting. Rodney, you also in your book talk about the German submarine U-209. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I got an email from Hollow Earth researcher Diane Robbins. Actually, she claims that she's a messenger, or that she receives messages from some people in the Earth, and that she's written these messages down.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So
So she's in contact with somebody there, or
that's what she
Mentally?
says, yeah, mentally. Yeah. Well, I got this email from her. She says that she just received an email from Joe Watson of Alaska, saying that he has a copy of this German letter in the German language of a crewman named Carl Unger that made it to our hollow earth soon after World War II.
Hmm.
The submarine's name was U-209 with Captain Heinrich Broda. And he wanted to know if I was interested in it. So yeah, I said, sure enough, send it to me. And I asked him later how he got that, and he says he got it from Billy Woodard that I had contacted in 2008. That was Billy Woodard that had got it from the Hollow Earth Society out of Houston, Missouri. And they probably, I don't know, got it from somebody in Germany, because I later received more information about Carl Unger's diary from Germany. But he sent me the letter. It was written in German with an English translation saying that they made it to the Hollow Earth. I later received a follow-up confirmation from a German named Patrick from Germany, in which he gave me the German archive website, which I give in my book, that you can go to, saying that particular German sub, the U-209, indeed went missing, and the location of it was near Greenland, between Greenland and Iceland, at the coordinates of 52 degrees north and 38 west. And the instructions that they had was to do a dive and go into this cavern under the Greenland continent that ended up in the Hollow Earth. And he wrote back this letter to his friend in the Hollow Earth Society. His name was, originator of the International Society for a Complete Earth, that at that time was in Missouri, in which he wrote this letter to his friend saying that he had reached the Hollow Earth in this U-209 after World War II, because the Germans, as we learned about it in Genesis for a New Age, Space Age by John B. Lith, he, as an intelligence officer, found out that there were hundreds of thousands of Germans escaping Germany before the end of World War II. And apparently he was able to find out exactly how they had learned that the Earth is hollow, and that they had made contact with the people of the Hollow Earth and asked permission to immigrate once they saw that they were losing World War II.
Interesting. Yeah, and it is interesting that Hitler and the Germans were interested in everything and anything that was a little different. Whether it's the Ark of the Covenant, like that cool movie, which is likely, based on something that's happened, to the Hollow Earth. It seems like, whatever it is, the Nazis were interested in finding out what was outside of the lane of norm for most of us. Science and everything else. They knew that there was something there that they needed to look at. So, yeah. You had mentioned Billy Faye Woodard. Who is that?
Billy Faye Woodard, I was contacted him in 2008. We were, since 2004, I had been working with Steve Curry of the expedition company out of Provo, Utah. When he was a young man, his father around the breakfast table told the family about the Hollow Earth theory, and he told them that someday that he wanted to mount an expedition to the Hollow Earth, but his expeditions were down rivers, river rafting. They Steve Curry inherited the family business, and one time when they were river rafting down the Zompo Gorge in China, his Tibetan guide pointed out where there was a falls and a hidden cavern behind it. And he told him the story about, like, in the late 1900s, when the king of the Agarth came out through that hall.
Agartha.
And said that someday they would emerge down to Earth to help establish world peace. And when he got back to the U.S. after learning about that in that cavern, he looked up my website on the internet, and he offered to put together an expedition to our Hollow Earth. Unfortunately, it took us several years, and in 2006, when we had about 40 people signed up for the expedition, he came back from South America and went in for a checkup at the medical doctor and found he had 6 brain tumors that were unoperable. And he went down real fast from there. In just a few months he died.
It's too bad, yeah.
But Woodard was one of the ones that contacted Bill Steve Curry, the expedition company, on our proposed expedition to go to the Hollow Earth. Our idea was to, well, first of all, he wanted to fly from a property he had in Patagonia, southern Chile, and go through the South Pole. But I told him I didn't know too much about the polar opening at that time down there, which I've learned quite a bit since, that it's just exactly the opposite of where the North Pole opening is in the Arctic. And so then he came up with the idea of renting a nuclear icebreaker from the Russians that were taking people to the pole every summer, to the North Geographic Pole. And our idea was to take it to the North Geographic Pole and then go south on the 143rd meridian, where I thought at that time that we would find the polar opening close enough that we would be able to find the entrance into the Hollow Earth.
Yeah.
And too bad, but he died on us, and our expedition was canceled by his parents and returned all the money to the people. But Woodard was one of the ones that contacted him, and he says, "You need to talk to me because I have the coordinates. The Admiral Byrd flew to the Hollow Earth." So we finally, I never contacted him. He contacted me in 2008. So we went over to visit him in Pahrump, Nevada. He's now living in Reno.
Yeah.
But he's the one that gave me those coordinates that I put on Google Map and drew a line from Alert Base where Admiral Byrd took off in 1927 to go to the Hollow Earth through the polar opening. And the route takes you indeed right through the polar opening. My location of 85 degrees north, 130, did I say west or east? I think it's east, because it's on the Russian side of the pole.
Yeah. Rodney, so what was the name of the guy from Provo? Something Curry, you said?
Yeah, Steve Curry.
Steve Curry. Is he the one that passed away?
Yeah, in 2006 from brain cancer. You know,
So
the same thing happened to Stephen Greer. He was trying to get Congress to listen to all these people that he got expert witnesses to confess and witness that they had been involved in crash retrievals. They had seen flying saucers. They had worked with reverse engineering the flying saucer crashes. all these witnesses, and they tried to shut him up too with cancer.
Yeah.
But he was able to survive it. It
Yeah,
was
for
brain
those of you
cancer.
out there who are not familiar with Stephen Greer, he's prominent in the UAP space for disclosure. Just look up his name, you'll find out plenty about him if you don't already know about him. But you're right, Rodney, yeah, he talks about the fact that, you know, he's had to brush with danger quite a few times
Well,
as
you
they try to silence him.
you know, it's pretty easy. Our military men, they have to receive all these vaccinations, and they have these vaccine guns that they can just spray right through your shirt. Well,
Right.
he could be going. Steve Curry could have been going through an airport on his way to and from South America, and they could have probably just sprayed him with the vaccine gun with cancer.
Yeah, that's pretty aggressive for. It's like somebody wanted to make sure, you know, that he wasn't going to make it to that point. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
They didn't want us to go to the whole
Yeah.
world. And the thing is, we were going to tell the whole world, look,
Yeah.
we're going to the whole earth through this polar opening, and it exists.
Yeah, Rodney, is there anybody who's considering making that trip at this point? Or is it on the back burner?
Well, I was contacted by a fellow from Australia who was originally from Colombia, and he asked me lots of questions, and I suggested that he contact McDowell, Mr. McDowell, that was in charge of the company that was taking people to the North Pole on Russian icebreakers. And he found out that it was his next door neighbor. So the last I heard was that they were going to go through the South Polar opening with 13 Caterpillars, snow plows,
Wow.
and all tied to each other in case one of them would fall down one of those crevices.
Yeah.
They could pull it
Well,
out.
it's interesting because there is a presence up there of military and science, right, from multiple countries in the Antarctic, right? So, but up north, there's nothing, right? There's nobody up there.
There's nothing. The polar opening in the Arctic is right out there in the middle of the ocean. The Eskimos have known about it for as long as they existed. They go over there hunting.
Yeah.
And they don't like to go over there because there's dinosaurs over there.
Mm.
And I have an account of the Eskimo hunting party that went. They were from the Thetis Island, north of Alaska.
Mhm.
And one winter they went out on the ice floes, and the storm came up and blew them around the Beaufort Gyre, which is it's just like a whirlpool up there in the Arctic. It takes whatever's floating up there around it in a circle, a big circle, and it actually takes you in. It took them actually into the polar opening to the intercontinent, which I believe is the halfway through the North Polar opening. And they got off on shore and went farther inland to get past the snow and ice, and found that there's dinosaurs up there. The Hollow Earth people apparently have a Jurassic Park,
Wow.
and they use that to scare people off from going into their country.
Yeah. That would be amazing to see.
It killed one of the dinosaurs, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, killed a couple of their Eskimos.
Mm.
But they
maybe.
cut off a piece of one of the dinosaurs that they had found dead, and took it back to Fairbanks with their pelts that they had captured, and as proof of their story.
Yeah. Well, Rodney, I want to get into the structure of the inner Earth, but first, before I do that, I did see in your book a mention of Charles Lindbergh, 1931. What's his story and involvement with any of this subject?
Well, Byrd, he flew across the Atlantic, solo flight, first time ever done,
Mm-hmm.
and he was really famous for that. But after that, he went looking for a Northwest Passage, flying up there in the Arctic, north of Canada, when he found the polar opening flying around up there. And he wanted to tell the world. So he was going to take his story to the New York Times, and the Navy got wind of it, and they told him, if you do, we're going to kidnap your baby and you'll never see him again. He
More
went,
of this again. Yeah.
he went ahead to go publish his story, and that evening they kidnapped his baby and he never saw him again. But I listened on the Coast to Coast one time. This guy came on saying that he was Lindbergh's baby. He was raised by a Navy
Oh, wow.
Navy family, and it convinced me that he wasn't killed. He was just kidnapped and shut up.
Yeah.
Lindbergh.
That is interesting. Well, that's enough to keep somebody quiet, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Once again, another effort to prevent this information from getting out. Okay, let's talk about the entry, access, and structure of the inner Earth. We've talked about the Arctic opening, the size, the sloping, and all that sort of thing. Before we talk about that, are there other entrances and access points around the planet? Seems like there might be.
There are.
Just curious.
There, besides that cavern that Carl Unger in his submarine went under Greenland to the Hollow Earth, there's another cavern under Antarctica that they've taken submarines to the Hollow Earth in that cavern. It's the same Germans, you know. So, but as far as other places, Mount Shasta is one. Billy Woodard told me that when he was working at Area 51, they broke into a Hollow Earth tunnel train.
Really?
Tunnel underneath, like 26 levels below the surface. And when the Hollow Earth people came to see why they had broken into their tunnel, they requested Billy Woodard to come as a representative of our military to the Hollow Earth. He says he went several times in the Hollow Earth tunnel trains to the Hollow Earth, and he says that their capital city is built around the original Garden of Eden. And they have a king that rules the inner world. And he estimated, I asked him where he thought the Garden of Eden was in their capital city. And he thought a little bit and says, maybe Arkansas. Well, I have come to the conclusion that it's located in Jackson County, Missouri, in Independence. 800 miles beneath Independence, Missouri, where the New Jerusalem is prophesied by Jesus Christ to be built in the latter days. And, well, Arkansas is pretty close to Missouri.
Yeah.
So he may have been a little bit off because he didn't understand exactly what direction he was going as he was traveling in their tunnel trains. But it's interesting to me that it was pretty close.
Yeah. Well, and for the benefit of those listening, that is actually something that is prophesied by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, where they believe that that is the location of Adam and Eve. Where it was.
The Garden of Eden.
Yeah, exactly, the Garden of Eden. Yeah, and so
but it actually
matches with what you're saying there.
It is there, but it's not on the surface of the planet. It's 800 miles down.
Okay, but that's different. Yeah, so we're talking subterranean.
Yeah, Adam and Eve, released in the Garden of Eden, 800 miles beneath Independence, Missouri, on the inner surface of the planet. It's on the highest mountain plateau of the inner continent. The Norwegian fishermen Olaf and James Jansen, when they went to the Hollow Earth through the North Pole opening in 1829-30, they were taken to their capital city, which they declared was built around the original Garden of Eden on the highest mountain plateau of the inner continent. And actually it is on their southern portion of their inner continent. Like it's sort of like the belly button of the Earth.
I see.
Because in one of our expedition members was James Still, and when he was over in California, he met this guy named my memory is going in my old age. But anyway, Lawrence Foreman was his name, and he gave him a copy of his book. He would go out to the desert from Los Angeles to camp, and he received this message from these people in this flying saucers that they wanted to meet him out there. And so when he went out there, he was welcomed aboard, and they asked him to write a book about what's going to happen to our Earth, because they consider themselves the guardians of this planet, and they said that they were our relatives, and they spoke their native language was Sanskrit, which Olaf Jansen found that the inner Earth the Hollow Earth inhabitants spoke the ancient language of Sanskrit, because I believe they're the lost 10 tribes, and before going to the Hollow Earth, they were taken captive by the Iranians, the Syrians, and placed into Iran, northern India, where they spoke Sanskrit at that time. And in those times, they always made the captured peoples change their language when they were uprooted out of their countries. So it's interesting that this flying saucer people spoke Sanskrit, said that they were our relatives, because the lost 10 tribes are our relatives. In fact, Olaf Jansen and his father called them the chosen people of their ancestors that was chosen to go into the North countries. And we were left behind, and became scattered Israel, whereas they're the lost tribes that are hidden up in the North countries, which is the Hollow Earth.
So let's recap for people real quick. We're saying that in the Hollow Earth, the inhabitants there are likely, mostly or maybe all, from the lost 10 tribes of Israel.
Yeah, Olaf Jansen said that their God, they told him that their God was Jehovah. Jehovah is the God of the ancient Israelites.
Yeah, that's interesting. Then you mentioned UFOs, flying saucers. I'm curious about your thoughts on that, because we do know that the same Admiral Byrd and a collection of military ships went after World War II down to Antarctica, and there's some claims and stories that they ran into something coming from possibly the inner Earth that had high technology and kind of pushed them away.
This is the end of Part 1, World Top Secret, Our Earth is Hollow, with author Rodney M. Cluff. Please join us again tomorrow for Part 2 of this episode.
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.